Have you ever felt it, even if you deny it? That strange moment when your heart starts beating faster, as if it knows something before your mind can grasp it. A vague suspicion, a tightness in your chest, a quiet whisper in the background of your thoughts telling you something isn't right. You're standing there, trying to hold on, while the person who once looked at you like you were everything now seems distant, unreachable, emotionally absent. They used to smile when they saw you. They used to seek you out, to need you, or at least it felt that way. But now, without any clear explanation, they've started to fade away. They no longer text you the same way. They no longer listen with real attention. Their eyes no longer hold the same warmth when they look at you. But you refuse to accept it. You create stories to justify their behavior. You invent reasons, excuses, imaginary circumstances. You lie to yourself, because to face the truth would mean demolishing the emotional castle you've built, brick by brick, out of pure illusion. And somewhere deep inside you, inside all of us, there's a part that clings to the sweet lie rather than face the violent truth. You're not here by accident. There's something in you that already knows. It senses it. It's tired of pretending not to notice. Yes, maybe you're surrounded by people, but how many of them are really with you? How many stay when you're no longer useful, when you're no longer fixing their problems, when you're not feeding their ego or filling their emptiness? There are people who don't love you, not the way you think, not the way you need. They tolerate you. They use you. They manipulate you with carefully rehearsed smiles. They keep you close, but always one step behind, because they're not interested in your essence. What they want is your energy, your attention, your emotional availability. And the worst part? They know exactly what they're doing. They know what buttons to press to keep you hooked. They know how to sound broken, just enough for you to feel like you have to fix them. And you, with that limitless heart, you do it, at the expense of your peace, your identity, your emotional well-being. Have you ever asked yourself why some people disappear just when you need them the most? Why they only show up when they're hurting, but vanish when it's your soul that's breaking? Have you stopped to reflect on how often you give and how little you receive in return? That emotional scale is always out of balance, but you keep trying to steady it, even if it means sacrificing yourself completely. Why? What are you really looking for? Love? Acceptance? Some long-lost validation you never received in childhood? Maybe a subconscious promise that if you just give enough, someone will finally choose to stay. Carl Jung said it clearly. People do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. We're going to descend, without fear, into the basement of your consciousness, into that dark corner where you've been storing all the "it's fine" and maybe they're just busy excuses. We're going to turn the light on in that uncomfortable space where a painful truth has been waiting to be acknowledged. That person you care so deeply about doesn't feel the same way. They never did. What they wanted wasn't you. It was the way you made them feel, the reflection of themselves they saw in your eyes. What they loved was what they could take from you. And the most painful part? You knew it. From the very beginning, you sensed it. But you looked away. Because the human mind is a master illusionist. It hides red flags behind hope. It turns warning signs into background noise. Accepting that someone has been using you is not only humiliating, it's emotionally shattering. It forces you to confront your vulnerability, your deep need for love, your emotional dependence. And that's where the real battle begins, between what you want to believe and what's actually happening, between the fantasy you've been feeding and the reality that's been draining you. This isn't going to be a comfortable video. You're not here to have your ego stroked. You're here because part of you is exhausted. Part of you needs answers. You want to understand why you let them treat you this way. You want to learn how to finally recognize those people who don't value you, who don't love you, who only use you, not by mistake, but by design, as a psychological pattern, as a way of being. This isn't just one sad story. It's a mirror. And what you're going to see might not be pleasant, but it will be necessary. So, get ready. We're going to explore the fractures in the human soul. We're going to analyze the behaviors of people who pretend to care, who use words as bait, who know exactly when to show up and when to disappear, just to keep you emotionally dependent. And we're going to do it through the lens of deep psychology, through the darkness that Jung understood so well. Because if you don't confront your shadow, you'll spend your life trapped in it. This is not just another video. This is a confrontation. With them, yes, but above all, with yourself. Let's continue exactly where we left off. We're going to go even deeper. No circles, no repetition, no soft edges. Let's talk about something silent, yet deeply powerful, something very few dare to name. Emotional debt. Yes, emotional debt. Because when someone uses you, and you don't see it, or worse, you see it and allow it, you fall into a toxic dynamic that rarely speaks its name, but always leaves a permanent scar. You begin to feel like you owe them something, a debt you never signed for, never agreed to, and yet you carry it every day. Why? Because they made you believe you had to, that walking away meant you were selfish, that setting boundaries made you a bad person, that if you didn't save them, you were heartless. They conditioned you, slowly, skillfully, with guilty silences, with gentle manipulation disguised as love, with words like, "You're all I have," or "I'd be nothing without you." They turned you into their safety net, their unofficial therapist, their emotional partner without commitment, their crutch. But they never gave you the same in return. They never matched your effort. They never sat down to truly ask, "And how are you, really?" Because it was never about you. It never was. And here's where one of the most sinister parts of this dynamic shows up. False gratitude. That empty kind of thankfulness used to keep you close. They say, "Thank you for always being there," but they do nothing to protect your well-being. They say, "I don't know what I'd do without you," but never make sure you have a space to lean on too. Gratitude becomes emotional blackmail. And you, with your heart full of pure intentions, fall into the trap again and again. Because a part of you needs that role of savior, even if you're bleeding inside. Carl Jung once spoke of the archetype of the wounded healer, a figure who dedicates themselves to healing others, all while neglecting their own wounds. And maybe, without even realizing it, that's exactly where you find yourself right now. Fixing, supporting, holding others together, even as the cracks inside you continue to widen. Because the more you give, the further they drift away. The more you surrender, the more they demand. The harder you try to be seen as valuable, the more invisible and replaceable you feel. And here comes one of life's cruelest paradoxes: the fear of losing someone who never truly loved you. How can that be? How can you cry over someone who has given you nothing tangible, nothing real, beyond the illusion that maybe someday they might. It's because you're not really mourning them. You're grieving the version of them that existed only in your mind. You're mourning the promises that were never fulfilled, all the scenarios you built up in your imagination, all the hopes, the what-ifs, the dreams that never came to be, and never will. So how do you begin to free yourself? The key lies in recognizing the difference between presence and connection. Because someone can physically be next to you every day and still not be truly with you in any meaningful sense. And the opposite is also true. Someone can leave your life and still treat you with more respect than the one who shares your bed each night. Some people don't stay because of love. They stay because it's convenient, because you're useful, because you've unknowingly become their free therapist, their emotional outlet, their personal audience, their dumping ground for unresolved frustrations. And if you don't put a stop to it, this turns into a pattern, an emotional addiction cleverly disguised as loyalty. You start justifying the unjustifiable. You begin to normalize pain, to romanticize waiting, to convince yourself that true love must mean sacrifice. But let me be very clear. What you're experiencing is not love. It's a one-sided dependency, a parasitic relationship where you keep giving, and they just keep taking. And if you're still holding on to hope, if you're still telling yourself that one day they'll wake up, see your worth, and finally say, "I appreciate you," then please stop. That day will not come. Because someone who feeds off you, who drains your energy for their own survival, will never be the one to teach you how to walk away. They won't let you go, not because they love you, but because losing you would mean confronting the emptiness they carry inside. And they're not ready to face that. They'd rather have you continue to carry their darkness while they pretend to be your light. Now we enter deeper waters. The idea of idealization as a form of emotional escapism. You don't idealize someone who uses you because they're truly exceptional. You do it because you need something to hold on to. You turn them into your compass, your anchor, your reason to keep going. Because if you let go, you're forced to confront the gaping void of your own loneliness. And that hurts more than any breakup ever could. But you can't keep running from yourself. You can't keep holding up someone who would never stop to catch you if you were the one falling. You can't keep calling it fate when it's clearly a toxic loop. Want to know if someone really loves you or just needs you? Watch how they react when you stop giving them what they want, when you say no, when you set a boundary. That's when the truth comes out. Because real love isn't tested when everything's easy. It's revealed when you're no longer useful to them. That's when the mask falls. That's when you see whether there was genuine affection or just convenience. And now, the hardest part to admit. Maybe that person you're so deeply tied to isn't even fully aware of the damage they're causing. Because there's something more dangerous than conscious manipulation, emotional unconsciousness. People who've never done the inner work, who carry unresolved trauma, who act out old patterns on autopilot. And you become the collateral damage of their inner war. But that still doesn't excuse it. Understanding isn't the same as excusing. You can have compassion for someone's pain and still walk away because your peace matters more than any shared history. You weren't born to be someone's unfinished project. You weren't born to be a backup plan. You weren't born to be an emotional sponge for someone else's chaos. And if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, it's because something inside you is already awakening. That part of you that no longer wants to be useful, but wants to be loved. Truly loved. without conditions, without manipulation, without emotional debt. So now the question becomes painfully simple. How many more chances will you give someone who doesn't love you? How many more times will you allow someone who doesn't value you to take up space in your life? How much longer will you postpone the bravest act of all, walking away when you know you're not being appreciated? You don't need to scream. You don't need revenge. You just need to do the one thing they fear the most: disappear. Because when you're gone, they can no longer use you. When you walk away, they lose their hold on you. And when you finally close that door, even if it breaks your heart, you begin to take your power back. And that's where we leave it for now. But what happens next? That's entirely up to you. Because if you've stayed until the end, if you haven't clicked away, if you didn't tune out with a, "Yeah, I already knew this" excuse, then let me tell you something that no one else will. You are no longer the same person you were just minutes ago. Because now you have something you didn't have before: awareness. Awareness of the hidden game, the silent power plays, the emotional language that speaks louder than any empty promise. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. That strange feeling you've carried with you, the sense that something was always off. It wasn't your imagination. That discomfort, that unease that would sneak up on you in their presence, the weight in your chest, the tension in your body. It was all real. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't paranoia. It was your intuition. It was your soul, desperately trying to speak, to warn you, to shake you awake. But you silenced it. You forced it into the shadows because you didn't want to upset someone who deep down never truly cared for you. You tolerated the discomfort because you convinced yourself that it was normal, that love was supposed to feel like that: confusing, painful, heavy. But now, you're not asleep anymore. The fog is lifting. The illusion is crumbling. You start to see the cracks, the imbalance, the silent manipulation, the dependency disguised as love. You start to see that it was never love. It was need. A need to be needed. A desire to be chosen. A hunger for attention that was never fully satisfied. And now, finally, you understand. You weren't free. You were convenient. You weren't cherished. You were used. You were a placeholder, a temporary comfort, a distraction. And the most powerful realization: you know that you can leave, that you deserve to leave. Because real self-love isn't a motivational quote taped to your mirror. It's not a bubble bath or soft music playing in the background. Real self-love is hard. It's painful. It's making the decision to walk away from someone who never truly saw you, who only came around when they were lonely and vanished the moment you needed them. And right here, right now, is where everything begins to change. Because when you find the courage to disappear from the life of someone who only saw you as useful, you don't become the villain. You become someone who finally realized that their worth isn't measured by how much they are needed, but by how much they choose not to give away to people who never earned it. You're not running away. You're being reborn. You're shedding the version of yourself that settled for less, that accepted crumbs and mistook them for care. The version of you that thought closeness meant love, that being around was enough, even if your soul was starving. And yes, it hurts. It burns. You can feel it in your chest. Your throat tightens just thinking about the goodbye. The thought of walking away feels like losing a part of yourself. But listen, that is your sign. That pain, it's the signal. Because no one should hurt you that deeply. No one should have that much control over your peace, especially from a distance. No one should be allowed to disturb your mind, your heart, your stability, the way they do. There are people who don't wish you harm, but still bring harm to your life. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Enough to close the door. Enough to disappear. Enough to finally, truly choose yourself. Yes, it might be difficult at first. Yes, the guilt may whisper. Yes, the urge to explain yourself might feel overwhelming. But hear me clearly, do not explain your peace. Do not justify your boundaries. Do not apologize for saving yourself. The person who failed to appreciate you when you were present doesn't deserve even a single word when you walk away. So if any part of this message has stirred something in you, if it has hit a nerve, cracked something open, brought something to the surface that you've been trying to bury, I want you to do just one thing, a simple act of declaration, a silent revolution. Leave this phrase in the comments: I am not your shelter if you are my storm. Nothing more. Just that. Anyone who reads it will understand. They'll know you've awakened too. And if this video spoke to you in a way no one else ever has, if you felt that finally someone found the words for what you've been carrying silently inside, then subscribe, but not out of obligation. Subscribe because here, in this chaotic corner of emotional turmoil, we're not done. Not even close. We're going to keep digging. We're going to keep pulling uncomfortable truths out from under the rug where they've been buried for too long. We're going to keep tearing off the masks, one by one, until what's left is nothing but the raw, unfiltered reality. And we're going to keep choosing something that very few have the courage to face: the truth, even when it hurts. Share this. Share it with the one who needs it most. With the person who's been stuck for years in a one-sided relationship, convincing themselves that crumbs are enough. With the one still waiting for a call that's never going to come. With the soul who wakes up every morning hoping that this will be the day they're finally seen, finally chosen. Be the spark. Be the switch that turns on the light in the darkest corner of someone else's shadow. And now I'm leaving. But not like everyone else. Not with a lukewarm goodbye. Not with a cookie-cutter phrase that sounds nice, but means nothing. I'm leaving with silence. The kind of silence that only arrives after everything's been said. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, but confronts. The silence that forces you to think, to feel, to remember. I'm leaving with that echo that won't shut off. That voice in your head that keeps playing even after you've closed this video. Because once you know your worth, you simply can't stay where you're not valued. So close your eyes, breathe, and disappear until the next truth finds you.
Carl Jung believed that the path to inner peace is not about suppressing emotions, but about transforming the way we relate to them. Many people assume that detachment means becoming indifferent or emotionally numb, but in reality, it is about understanding our emotions deeply and learning to let go of what no longer serves us. Think about how often you find yourself trapped in repetitive thoughts about a person, a situation, or a painful memory. These experiences can drain your energy, fill you with anxiety, and make you feel stuck. Maybe it's a relationship that brings you more pain than joy, yet you struggle to walk away. Or perhaps it's a past event that lingers in your mind, making you feel like you can never fully move on. Jung suggested that these patterns are not random. They are messages from your unconscious mind urging you to pay attention. Unlike logical reasoning, the unconscious does not communicate through words, but rather through emotions, symbols, and behavioral patterns. It continuously sends us signals, yet most of the time, we ignore them. This is why we often find ourselves repeating the same mistakes, facing similar conflicts, or attracting the same kind of relationships. According to Jung, this happens because we have not yet learned the lessons these experiences are meant to teach us. Life, he believed, is an ongoing dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious. Until we acknowledge this internal conversation, we remain caught in a cycle of frustration and pain. True emotional detachment is not about forcing yourself to forget or pretending something doesn't affect you. It's about recognizing the emotional weight you've been carrying, processing it, and consciously deciding to release it. Letting go is not a form of escape. It is an act of courage. It requires us to face our deepest fears, acknowledge our wounds, and make peace with them. When we continue to hold on to people, situations, or memories that no longer align with who we are, we sacrifice our own well-being. We may lose our peace of mind, our energy, or even our sense of purpose. Jung taught that real transformation happens when we dare to confront our inner world. By embracing our shadows instead of running from them, we open the door to self-discovery, growth, and a deeper connection with ourselves. The question is, are you willing to release what is holding you back in order to step into the life you truly deserve? Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path feels familiar, predictable, and safe, yet deep inside, you know it leaves you unfulfilled. The other is uncertain, filled with the unknown, but it holds the possibility of something greater. Most people choose the familiar road, even if it causes them pain, because the fear of uncertainty outweighs their desire for change. But Jung challenges us to rethink that fear, not as an obstacle but as an invitation to grow. When you start releasing what no longer serves you, something remarkable happens. Your energy shifts, your mind clears, and suddenly, life begins to align. The right people enter your life, new opportunities emerge, and most importantly, you rediscover a sense of peace you may have forgotten was possible. But this process demands courage. Letting go is rarely easy, especially when we've grown attached to what is familiar, even if it harms us. The key lies in trusting yourself, in that quiet, inner voice that always knows what is best, even when you ignore it. Jung believed that within each of us exists an internal compass, a silent guide pointing us toward our truth. This compass is our intuition, our deep connection to the unconscious. And when we learn to follow it, life becomes simpler, more authentic, and profoundly fulfilling. Now, take a moment to reflect. What is truly holding you back? What emotional weight are you still carrying that no longer serves you? And how would your life change if you allowed yourself to release it? It's not an easy decision, but it's one of the most powerful choices you can make. Because in the end, emotional detachment is not about loss. It's about liberation. It's about creating space for new beginnings, for what truly matters, for what aligns with your soul. And when you take that step, everything transforms: your energy, your relationships, and most importantly, your inner peace. As you embark on this journey of emotional detachment, remember, you are not losing, you are gaining. You might find yourself letting go of people, situations, or even long-held beliefs, but in doing so, you are reclaiming something far more valuable: your emotional freedom and your true self. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as a journey of self-discovery, a path to uncover who you truly are beyond the roles and masks you have worn to fit into the world. Individuation, according to Jung, is the key to a fulfilling life. It is a process of integration, embracing both your light and your shadows, and allowing yourself to be whole. But you cannot be whole if you are still clinging to toxic relationships, limiting beliefs, or unresolved emotions. Letting go is an essential part of this journey. Only when you release what is not truly yours can you open yourself to what is meant for you. Have you ever felt like you were living a life that wasn't really your own, as if you were merely following a script someone else wrote for you? Now is the time to take control of your story. Jung would argue that this happens because we have allowed external expectations to dictate our identity. Society, family, friends, and even our own insecurities shape a mold we struggle to fit into, even at the cost of betraying our true selves. But there comes a point when that mask becomes unbearable, when the weight of pretending is too heavy to carry. That moment, when your authentic self begins to push against the surface, can be unsettling, even painful. Yet, It is also a powerful turning point, a chance to break free. Because the moment you start questioning the illusions you've been living under, when you dare to confront what you truly feel and think, you take the first real step toward liberation. Jung encourages us to see this not as a crisis, but as a transformation, an opportunity to shed what no longer defines us and embrace what genuinely does. You may be wondering, how do I begin? How do I let go? The answer lies in self-reflection. Set aside a quiet moment with yourself and ask, what emotions have I been suppressing? What situations or relationships are draining me? And most importantly, what do I truly want from my life? These questions may seem simple, but they hold immense power. Answering them with honesty sparks a conversation with your unconscious, and that dialogue is the first step toward healing. Jung believed that the unconscious is like a vast ocean, full of hidden treasures but also lurking shadows. These shadows are the parts of ourselves we have denied, buried, or rejected because they felt unacceptable. But ignoring them does not erase them. In fact, it strengthens their hold over us. Only when we find the courage to confront them can we begin to integrate and release their influence. Imagine your mind as a garden. If you neglect the weeds, they will not disappear. They will grow, choking the flowers, draining the soil of nutrients. But if you take the time to clear them, to tend to the space, you can plant something new, something vibrant. The same applies to your emotions and relationships. If you do not examine and nurture them, they will end up controlling you. However, the moment you decide to face them, you create the space for something better. This process may lead you to realize that certain people in your life no longer align with who you are becoming. Some relationships, instead of uplifting you, keep you trapped in cycles of negativity. Letting go of them is not an act of selfishness, but one of self-respect. And Jung would remind us that self-love is not a luxury. It is a necessity, because only when you truly value yourself can you extend authentic love to others. You may also uncover limiting beliefs that have been holding you back for years. Thoughts like, I am not enough, I need this person to be happy, or if I let go, I will never find something better. Your beliefs are not absolute truths. They are stories you have constructed over time, often shaped by the expectations of others. But what if I told you that you have the power to rewrite those stories? You are not doomed to live under the same limiting narratives. You can choose a perspective that empowers you instead of one that keeps you trapped in the past. When you start making these changes, something remarkable happens. Not only does your mind feel lighter, but your energy shifts as well. The emotional burdens that once kept you stuck begin to dissolve, transforming into a force that drives your personal growth. Confusion fades into clarity, apathy turns into motivation, and you experience a deep sense of peace you may not have felt in a long time. This is because letting go is not about losing. It's about returning to yourself, to your balance, to your true essence. Emotional detachment is not an act of coldness or indifference. It is, in reality, a sign of emotional and spiritual maturity. Jung spoke of the importance of integrating the parts of ourselves that we have chosen to ignore or suppress. Embracing our shadow does not just heal us internally. It transforms our relationships, allowing us to break free from toxic cycles and repetitive patterns. Every time you choose to release something that no longer aligns with you, you are making a courageous decision. You are sending a clear message to your unconscious mind. You deserve more, you are ready to evolve, and you are willing to create space for what truly elevates you. But this process is not easy. Letting go means confronting some of your deepest fears. The fear of being alone, the fear of change, the fear of the unknown. Yet, as Jung taught, true power lies in facing these fears head-on. Resistance to change is natural. Your mind will try to cling to what is familiar, even if that familiarity brings suffering. But here's the real question. What are you sacrificing by staying where you no longer belong? Are you giving up your mental peace, your happiness, your dreams? Choosing to let go is not a loss. It is an opening. You are not losing anything that truly belongs to you. You are making room for something greater, something more authentic, something aligned with who you are becoming. Imagine how your life would change if you stopped carrying the weight of what no longer serves you. Think about the relief, the regained energy, the deep sense of calm you could experience. That kind of freedom is not a distant fantasy. It is within your reach. All it takes is one decision, recognizing what is holding you back and choosing to release it. Jung taught that our unconscious mind constantly communicates with us, but it does so through symbols, emotions, and recurring patterns in our lives. If you find yourself stuck in relationships that drain you or situations that bring you continuous discomfort, it is not a coincidence. It is your unconscious sending you a message, showing you a lesson that you have yet to learn. However, we often ignore these signs, hoping things will change on their own or believing we have no control over our reality. But the truth is, change is always within your grasp. It is not about waiting for the perfect moment or relying on luck. It is about taking action, listening to what your soul truly needs, and having the courage to write a new story for yourself. Let me tell you something, you have the power. You have the ability to reshape your life, redirect your energy, and create an environment that truly reflects your values and authenticity. But to do that, you must be willing to release what no longer serves you. And this act of letting go isn't just a gift to yourself. It's a ripple effect that touches everyone around you. When you free yourself from toxic relationships and limiting patterns, you unconsciously inspire others to do the same. Emotional detachment isn't about abandoning everything without thought. It's about taking a deep, honest look at your life, recognizing what aligns with you and what doesn't, then making choices that reflect that awareness. This process takes courage, but it also demands patience and self-compassion. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, but every small step you take moves you closer to the inner peace you crave. And here's the remarkable thing. As you begin to release, you'll notice that life starts to shift in unexpected ways. The right people come into your life, new opportunities arise, and decisions that once felt overwhelming suddenly become clear and effortless. It's as if the universe responds to your decision to live in alignment with your truth. Jung spoke of synchronicity, a profound concept that perfectly illustrates this. When you are in tune with yourself, the external world begins to mirror that harmony. This isn't magic. It's the manifestation of your internal energy. And that energy, when it's focused and unburdened by unnecessary attachments, has the power to transform not only your life but also the lives of those around you. Of course, this journey won't be without challenges. There will be moments when the pull of the familiar tempts you to return to old habits, even when you know they no longer bring you happiness. But every time you choose peace over chaos, authenticity over fear, you're building a life of meaning, one that no one can take from you. As you navigate the path of emotional detachment, remember, you are not alone. Even though it may feel like you're venturing into the unknown, countless others have walked this road before you. Jung referred to this as a journey of the inner hero, a process where each step toward confronting your fears and shedding emotional burdens brings you closer to your truest self. Think of it this way. Every time you choose to let go, you are breaking invisible chains that have held you captive, chains woven from expectations, guilt, and the fear of rejection. But by breaking them, you're opening the door to a kind of freedom that many will never experience because they remain trapped in the comfort of the familiar. Walking this path does not mean you will be free from pain or discomfort. On the contrary, there will be moments when you feel fragile, confused, or even lost. Yet, it is precisely in those moments of uncertainty that the most profound transformation takes place. Jung believed that consciousness cannot awaken without suffering. It is through these struggles that you uncover your true strength, your resilience, and, most importantly, your authenticity. Releasing what no longer serves you allows you to reconnect with something that has always been within you, your intuition, that inner voice that knows what is right for you, even when you choose to ignore it. But when you finally start listening, something extraordinary happens. The decisions that once felt impossible suddenly become clear. The The relationships that once drained you start to fade, making room for the ones that uplift you. This is not random. Jung believed in the power of synchronicity, the mysterious way in which events align as if the universe is responding to your inner transformation. These experiences are not mere coincidences. They are proof that aligning your life with your truth has a real impact on the world around you. However, reaching this level of clarity requires deep self-exploration. You must be willing to face your shadows, the hidden aspects of yourself that you have suppressed because they feel uncomfortable or even frightening. Jung famously said that enlightenment is not achieved by imagining figures of light, but by bringing darkness into consciousness. This is the most profound and transformative inner work you can do. When you face your shadows, you are not just healing old wounds. You are reclaiming lost parts of yourself. Perhaps you will rediscover forgotten talents, abandoned dreams, or an inner strength you never knew you had. This process is far from easy, but the result is a life that feels genuine, purposeful, and, above all, peaceful. Imagine waking up each morning feeling light, knowing that every decision you make is aligned with who you truly are. This does not mean that life will be perfect or that you will never encounter obstacles, but it does mean that you will have the clarity and strength to face them with balance and confidence. Part of this journey involves learning to set boundaries. Jung believed that our energy is sacred and must be protected from anything that drains it. This is not always easy, especially when it involves people close to us. But setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of self-respect. When you take care of your energy, you are not only benefiting yourself, but also those who truly matter, because you are showing up as your best self. Think about how different your life would be if you could say no without guilt, if you could prioritize your needs without feeling selfish, if you could surround yourself with people who uplift you instead of exhausting you. This is not some unattainable dream. It is something you can achieve when you choose to detach emotionally from what no longer resonates with you. Letting go does not mean failure or giving up. It means choosing something better for yourself. Choosing yourself means prioritizing your peace, happiness, and authenticity. Every time you make decisions that support your well-being, you are actively shaping a life that truly reflects who you are. When you begin to live in alignment with your inner truth, something incredible happens. You naturally attract everything that resonates with your essence. The right people, the right opportunities, and the deep sense of peace you have been searching for all start to flow effortlessly into your life. But this is not a coincidence. It is the direct result of having the courage to release what no longer serves you and embrace the person you were always meant to be. This journey is not about reaching a final destination. It is a continuous evolution. There will be days when fear or doubt try to creep back in, but now you have something invaluable, the awareness that you have a choice. You get to decide which thoughts to nurture, which relationships to keep, and which path to follow. That is your greatest power. The beauty of emotional detachment, as Jung taught, is that it not only transforms your inner world, but also creates a ripple effect in the world around you. When you break free from the chains of the past, you inspire others to do the same. When you choose to live from a place of authenticity, you set off a chain reaction that touches everyone in your life. Your transformation becomes a source of light, a silent yet powerful influence that encourages others to embrace their own truth. So now, I invite you to reflect deeply. What are you ready to release today? What beliefs, relationships, or emotions have been holding you back from moving forward? The answers to these questions could be the key to stepping into the life you were always meant to live. The decision to let go is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage. It means you are ready to step into the life you truly deserve, free from the weight of the past and open to the infinite possibilities that await you. Growth is not about avoiding pain, but about transforming it into wisdom. It is about using every challenge, every setback, and every difficult moment as fuel to propel you forward. Imagine for a moment how your life would change if you no longer carried the burdens that have been weighing you down. Imagine waking up every day with a heart full of peace, knowing that you are in alignment with your truth, no longer seeking validation from others, no longer trapped by past regrets, but instead walking with confidence toward the life you were meant to live. This is not a dream. It is a choice to reclaim your power, to break free from limiting beliefs, and to embrace the limitless potential that exists within you. The journey will not always be easy, and there will be moments of doubt, but every step you take toward your true self will be worth it. You are capable of incredible transformation, and the moment you decide to release what no longer serves you, you will realize that the only thing standing between you and your best life has always been the fear of letting go. So I ask you once more, what are you ready to release today? What part of your past, what fear, what toxic attachment are you willing to leave behind so that you can finally embrace the future that is waiting for you? The time to take action is now. Your new life begins the moment you choose it. And remember, this is just the beginning. If you found this message valuable, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for more content that will guide you on your journey of transformation. See you in the next video.
When we hear the word manipulator, the first image that usually comes to mind is that of a deceitful person, someone who deliberately tries to control, influence, or take advantage of others for personal gain. We may imagine someone cunning, perhaps even sinister, who operates with hidden motives and dark intentions. This perception is common, and in many situations, it's not wrong. There are indeed people who consciously choose to use manipulation as a tool for control, dominance, or personal benefit. However, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, offers a much deeper, more profound perspective, one that invites us to look beyond the obvious behavior and question what truly drives a manipulative person at a psychological level. According to Jung, we are all composed of various inner elements, and one of the most important, yet often overlooked, is something he called the shadow. The shadow is not an external force. It's not a separate entity that lives outside of us. Instead, it is an essential, internal part of our psyche. It represents the hidden, repressed, and often denied aspects of who we are. These are the sides of ourselves that we either refuse to see or actively try to suppress: our insecurities, our jealousy, our rage, our selfishness, our unresolved pain, and the desires or impulses we've been taught to feel ashamed of. It is important to understand that the shadow is not inherently evil. It is not some monster lurking within us, waiting to do harm. Rather, it is made up of parts of ourselves that we've disowned because they conflict with the image of who we think we should be. Society, culture, family, religion, all of these forces teach us certain values, and in trying to conform to them, we push away anything within us that doesn't fit. We try to be good, kind, generous, and strong, and in doing so, we hide away everything that doesn't align with that image. But what we reject doesn't disappear. It simply goes underground, where it begins to operate unconsciously. Now let's return to the manipulator. In Jungian terms, a manipulative person is not merely someone trying to gain power over others. More deeply, they are someone whose shadow has taken the wheel. They are being driven, often without awareness, by the disowned and unacknowledged parts of themselves. Manipulation, then, becomes a symptom, a behavioral expression of unresolved psychological content. It's not always planned or intentional. In fact, many manipulators are not even fully aware that they are manipulating others. They may see their actions as justified, necessary, or even caring. But beneath those actions lies a buried emotional reality, wounds that have not been healed, fears that have not been faced, and a sense of emptiness that they are desperately trying to avoid. What they are really trying to do, although unconsciously, is to soothe their inner pain by exerting control over the outer world. When a person feels powerless or invisible inside, one way to feel important is to gain power over others. If they feel unloved or rejected, they may manipulate in order to receive attention, validation, or affection, even if it's artificial. In this way, the manipulative behavior becomes a survival mechanism, a way to navigate a world that in their perception is threatening or untrustworthy. It's essential to understand that this doesn't excuse the behavior. Manipulation can cause real harm, especially when it's persistent, calculated, or abusive. But recognizing the deeper psychological roots of manipulation allows us to respond not just with judgment, but with insight. We begin to understand that behind the desire to control others, there is often a person who feels profoundly out of control within themselves. This inner turmoil is often the result of childhood experiences, perhaps environments where love was conditional, where emotional expression was discouraged or punished, or where the child learned that being honest about their needs led to rejection or punishment. Over time, they may have learned to hide their vulnerabilities and use indirect methods like guilt-tripping, gaslighting, or passive aggression to get what they needed. These strategies become embedded in their personality because at some point they worked. They became tools of survival. And so, the manipulator grows into adulthood not fully integrated, not fully aware of their own psychological landscape. They continue to act from their shadow, projecting their unacknowledged traits onto others, trying to manage internal chaos by controlling external situations. Often, they are stuck in a loop of behavior that repeats the same emotional patterns over and over, unable to break free because they do not recognize the true origin of their suffering. From Jung's perspective, the way forward for a manipulator, or for any of us who see manipulation in our own behavior, is not through shame, denial, or punishment, but through integration. The shadow must be brought into the light of consciousness. This means being brutally honest with oneself, acknowledging the parts we are least proud of, and choosing to face what we have spent so long avoiding. It means developing self-awareness, self-compassion, and the courage to take responsibility for our inner world. When we integrate the shadow, we don't eliminate it. Instead, we learn to work with it. We understand its language and recognize its influence. This allows us to stop acting it out on others and begin transforming it into strength, creativity, and authenticity. A person who has made peace with their shadow no longer needs to manipulate because they are no longer ruled by fear or emotional scarcity. They become more whole, more honest, and more capable of forming genuine connections based on mutual respect and trust. So, while manipulation can be destructive, it is also a signal, a call from the unconscious mind. It's a symptom that something within us is fragmented and seeking healing. Jung's message is that we must listen to these signals, not with condemnation, but with curiosity, because only through understanding what lies beneath the surface can we begin to reclaim our integrity and walk a path of true inner freedom. Carl Jung emphasizes a critical truth about human behavior, that the shadow, that darker and often hidden aspect of our psyche, operates primarily within the unconscious realm. This simple fact carries profound implications. It means that many of our actions, especially those that manipulate or harm others, may not be deliberate in the way we typically imagine. Instead, manipulation can occur automatically, almost as a reflex. It's a learned and deeply reinforced behavioral pattern that becomes second nature over time, often without us even realizing it's happening. The shadow, therefore, holds immense power, not only over the individual harboring it, but also over those around them who are affected by its projection. This unconscious force becomes particularly dangerous in the hands of a manipulator. Manipulators tend to project their own inner shadows onto others, their fears, their insecurities, their unhealed wounds, and their deep frustrations. In doing so, they create an illusion of control or superiority that masks their internal chaos. It's a coping mechanism, albeit a destructive one. What results is a toxic dynamic in relationships. One person feels overwhelmed, dominated, or emotionally suffocated, while the other exerts power and control, often at the expense of someone else's vulnerability. Jung's teachings offer us a powerful insight. No one is born a manipulator. This behavior is not innate. Rather, manipulation is a symptom, a red flag, waving in response to unresolved emotional pain or psychological imbalance. It is a sign that something inside the person is broken or neglected. From this perspective, the manipulator is not just an antagonist in someone else's story. They are also, in a way, a victim of their own shadow. This doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it reframes them. It encourages us to view the manipulator not simply as a villain, but as a person suffering from fragmentation within their psyche, someone who has become entangled in their own unhealed wounds. Understanding this dynamic is vital. It allows us to stop internalizing manipulation when it happens to us. We begin to realize that someone else's attempt to control or deceive us is not necessarily a reflection of our own worth. It is, more often than not, a reflection of the inner turmoil that the manipulator is carrying. Recognizing this reality helps us set boundaries without guilt or confusion. It empowers us to protect ourselves without feeling ashamed or responsible for another person's toxic behavior. Furthermore, Jung's psychological framework offers hope not just for those on the receiving end of manipulation, but also for those who fall into the trap of becoming manipulators themselves. If the shadow can be recognized, if it can be brought into conscious awareness, then it can be worked with. It can be understood, healed, and ultimately integrated. This process is neither quick nor easy. It requires honest self-reflection, courage, and often pain. But it is also a path toward genuine transformation. Integrating the shadow means reclaiming one's authentic personal power, the kind that doesn't rely on control, dominance, or deception, but is rooted in self-awareness and emotional integrity. So when we ask ourselves, who is a manipulator? Jung's approach encourages a deeper, more compassionate understanding. It's not just about labeling certain people as toxic and cutting them out of our lives. It's about recognizing the invisible forces at play, the unconscious drives that shape human behavior. It also involves turning inward and acknowledging that we all carry a shadow. We all have the potential to fall into manipulative patterns if we are not aware of our wounds and projections. This awareness is where true healing begins. When we understand manipulation through Jung's lens, we gain the tools to recognize it not only in others, but within ourselves. We begin to identify the subtle ways it creeps into our relationships and our communication. This understanding becomes a foundation for personal growth, self-defense, and spiritual evolution. It teaches us to navigate relationships with clarity, to protect our emotional well-being, and to remain connected to our most authentic selves. This is the starting point for a transformative journey, a journey that leads us away from psychological entanglement and toward emotional liberation. It allows us to see manipulation not just as a social issue, but as a spiritual call to action, a call to examine our own shadows, to understand what we are unconsciously projecting onto others, and to heal those parts of ourselves that cry out for attention through control or deceit. In the next part, we will delve even deeper. We'll explore how archetypes and the shadow collaborate in the psychological game of manipulation. These forces, though often invisible, are powerful and ever-present in daily life. They influence how we perceive others, how we relate to the world, and how we interpret our experiences. By understanding how these archetypes function in tandem with the shadow, we can begin to unravel the hidden layers of manipulation and become more conscious participants in our own emotional and psychological narratives. To fully grasp the complexity of manipulation, Carl Jung provides us with an indispensable tool: the theory of archetypes. Archetypes are universal patterns that reside within the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir of shared human experiences and knowledge. These patterns are like invisible blueprints, subtly guiding our thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and relationships. Most of the time, we're unaware of their influence, and yet they are constantly shaping how we move through the world. These archetypes can manifest in the form of internal voices or symbolic figures: the hero, the victim, the ruler, the trickster, the mother, and many more. They play out in our personal stories and in the stories we tell culturally. They also intersect with the shadow, giving it structure and personality. For instance, someone with a dominant victim archetype might unconsciously attract relationships where they are manipulated, while someone governed by the ruler archetype might unconsciously seek control and domination over others. Understanding how these archetypes interact with the shadow opens the door to profound inner work. It allows us to observe ourselves with greater honesty and compassion. We can begin to ask difficult but necessary questions. Which archetypes are most active in my life? How are they influenced by my unacknowledged wounds? Am I projecting my pain outward instead of healing it within? These questions are not easy, but they are essential for breaking free from cycles of manipulation, whether we are caught in them as victims or perpetuating them unconsciously. In this way, Jung's insights do more than explain manipulation. They invite us to grow, to heal, and to reclaim our psychological autonomy. They remind us that although the shadow may be hidden, it is never beyond our reach. With awareness, courage, and compassion, we can bring light to even the darkest corners of our inner world. And in doing so, we create the possibility for healthier relationships, greater emotional resilience, and a more authentic way of being. Among the various psychological archetypes that shape human behavior, some are deeply connected to the dynamics of manipulation, both in the sense of manipulating others and being manipulated oneself. Take, for example, the archetype of the authoritarian father or the controlling figure. This archetype often manifests in individuals who feel an intense need to exert power over those around them in order to feel secure. Control becomes a shield, a way to guard against vulnerability and uncertainty. It's not just about dominance, it's about using power as a coping mechanism for deeper, often unacknowledged fears. On the other hand, there's the victim archetype, a figure who, consciously or unconsciously, leverages their own suffering, helplessness, or moral high ground to influence others. This manipulation may not always appear overt or aggressive. Sometimes it takes the form of guilt-tripping or emotional dependency, where the manipulator presents themselves as so wounded or fragile that others feel obliged to yield to their needs, sacrificing their own autonomy in the process. This emotional dynamic can be incredibly subtle and deeply rooted in psychological patterns learned during early life experiences. But manipulation is not only the result of the archetypes a person expresses outwardly, it also has much to do with the inner workings of the psyche, especially with what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the hidden, often dark aspect of the self, an inner space where we store emotions, desires, and traits that we have rejected or repressed over time. These are not necessarily evil or malicious parts of us. More often, they are simply parts we have not learned to accept, perhaps because they were once deemed unacceptable by our family, society, or even ourselves. When the shadow is not consciously integrated, when we remain unaware of these hidden aspects of ourselves, they don't simply disappear. Instead, they manifest in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. They leak out through our actions, words, reactions, and especially through our relationships with others. A person who manipulates from this place is often someone whose shadow is active and unacknowledged. They may not realize they're being manipulative. From their perspective, they might believe they are helping, protecting, or even loving. But in reality, their behaviors are being driven by unconscious patterns rooted in their own unresolved wounds. A manipulator, seen through this lens, is not just a villain or a toxic personality. Rather, they are someone using archetypes unconsciously as tools or even as weapons to gain control. They might adopt the persona of the savior, someone who appears noble, self-sacrificing, and trustworthy, only to later use the trust they've earned as leverage. Or they might slip into the role of the martyr, constantly emphasizing their own suffering and sacrifice in order to evoke guilt or obligation in others. These are not random choices. They are deeply ingrained behavioral patterns shaped by internal forces the person doesn't fully understand. What makes manipulation particularly powerful, and at times insidious, is its ability to tap into the unconscious in both the manipulator and the manipulated. It's not just a matter of clever words or emotional tactics, it's a profound psychological game that plays with symbols, emotions, and past traumas. When someone manipulates, they are not only acting from their own disowned shadow, they are reaching into the hidden wounds and unmet needs of the other person as well. It becomes a dance of projections, where each gesture, each phrase, each seemingly innocent expression carries a deeper resonance. And often, neither party fully realizes what is happening until the damage is done. For example, a skilled manipulator, often without being fully aware, can identify and exploit emotional triggers in others. They might sense someone's deep need for approval, their unresolved fear of abandonment, or a lingering sense of guilt. By subtly activating these emotional buttons, they can guide the other person's actions and decisions without ever issuing a direct command. The person being manipulated may feel as though they are acting of their own free will, but in reality, they are being pulled along by unconscious forces that override clarity and self-determination. It's as if their inner archetypes and unhealed wounds are making choices on their behalf. This complex interplay between shadow and archetype creates a psychological terrain that is both dark and intricate, a space filled with illusions, projections, and emotional traps. Yet, this same space offers a tremendous opportunity for growth and awareness. The moment we begin to recognize these patterns, both in ourselves and in those around us, we gain the power to step outside the game. we can start to see manipulation for what it is, not simply an act of malice, but a symptom of disconnection from the deeper self. Awareness is the first step. When we learn to identify when someone is using an archetype inauthentically, when they are performing a role to achieve control rather than expressing their true self, we begin to discern the difference between manipulation and genuine interaction. Similarly, when we reflect on our own behaviors and notice moments where we may have used guilt, control, or emotional appeals to get our way, we start reclaiming power from the unconscious. The true antidote to manipulation lies in the process Jung called shadow integration. This is not an easy journey. It requires honesty, courage, and compassion, especially toward ourselves. Integrating the shadow means turning toward the parts of ourselves we've long denied. The anger, the envy, the vulnerability, the hunger for recognition, the fear of being unloved. It means accepting that we are not perfect, that we have contradictions, and that these contradictions are not signs of failure, but invitations to wholeness. Through this inner work, we begin to illuminate what was once hidden. The energies that once drove our unconscious behaviors become available to us in new, constructive ways. We are no longer bound to repeat the same manipulative patterns. We stop being victims of our inner dramas and start becoming authors of our own stories. And perhaps most importantly, we also stop being agents of manipulation toward others. As we grow in self-awareness and compassion, we become more capable of authentic relationships, ones based on mutual respect, transparency, and emotional integrity. We stop needing to control others to feel secure, and we stop allowing ourselves to be controlled in order to feel loved or accepted. This is the heart of psychological healing, to move from unconscious compulsion to conscious choice, to step out of the shadows and into the light of self-knowledge, to recognize the archetypes within us, not as rigid roles to perform, but as energies we can channel with awareness and intention, and to meet our shadow not as an enemy, but as a teacher. In doing so, we reclaim our power, not the power to dominate, but the power to live and love authentically, free from the invisible chains of manipulation. In summary, the core of human interaction lies a subtle but powerful dynamic that often goes unnoticed: the interplay between archetypes and the shadow. These deep psychological patterns, first explored by Carl Jung, form an invisible backdrop against which manipulation frequently plays out. When we begin to truly understand this psychological landscape, we gain not only the ability to recognize manipulative behaviors in others, but also a deeper insight into our own reactions. Through this awareness, we can begin to reclaim our inner strength and autonomy, that part of ourselves that is often lost when we are entangled in manipulative relationships. What many people fail to realize is that manipulation doesn't emerge from a vacuum. It has roots that run deep into the unconscious mind. It grows from wounds, fears, and unresolved emotional pain that often stretch back to childhood or early relationships. To see manipulation clearly, to truly grasp why someone behaves manipulatively, we have to go beneath the surface, beyond the immediate behaviors, and look into the emotional injuries that fuel those actions. Jung taught us that we all have a shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves, where we repress the aspects of our personality that we deem unacceptable or painful. In this shadow, emotional wounds live and fester. They are often invisible, even to the person who carries them. When left unacknowledged or unhealed, These wounds influence our behavior in ways we might not consciously realize. One of the most common and damaging manifestations of this is manipulation. Manipulation often arises as a defense mechanism. It's not always born from malice or calculated cruelty, but more frequently from fear and a desperate attempt to avoid pain. A person who manipulates is usually someone who has experienced some form of emotional trauma, abandonment, rejection, neglect, betrayal, humiliation. Most of the time, these painful events occurred early in life, in moments when the individual was most vulnerable and in need of love, security, and validation. Imagine a child who was constantly overlooked, whose needs were dismissed, whose emotions were invalidated. That child grows up carrying a silent fear, the fear of being insignificant, of not being seen or loved. That fear doesn't just disappear. It hides, but it shapes everything. It teaches the child, now an adult, that in order to survive emotionally, they must find ways to control their environment. And often, that control comes in the form of manipulating others. Behind every manipulative act is fear, a fear that is often primal and overwhelming. Fear of being abandoned again, fear of being powerless, fear of being emotionally exposed or rejected. The manipulator, whether consciously or not, believes that by controlling others, they can protect themselves from those devastating emotions. It's a kind of emotional armor, a shield built not from confidence, but from desperation. But here's the paradox. The more someone manipulates others to avoid pain, the more pain they actually create, both for themselves and those around them. They might temporarily avoid the sting of rejection or the ache of vulnerability, but in the process, they damage their relationships. Manipulation breeds distrust, distance, and isolation. It leads to conflict, resentment, and disconnection. And rather than soothing the original wounds, it reinforces them. This is why it's so important to view manipulation through a compassionate yet truthful lens. It doesn't excuse the harm manipulative behavior causes, but it does help us understand it. People don't manipulate because they're inherently evil or cruel. They do so because they are deeply afraid, and they've never learned healthier ways to cope with those fears. Recognizing this can be incredibly powerful. It allows us to set boundaries without hatred. It allows us to protect ourselves while also understanding the brokenness in others. And perhaps most importantly, it gives us the insight to look within and ask, where might I be acting from fear? Where do my own wounds drive my behavior? Because manipulation is not just something that happens to us. It's something we are all capable of when we're not conscious of our own shadow. The path to healing, then, is not just about avoiding manipulative people. It's about bringing our own unconscious patterns into the light. It's about doing the deep work of healing our wounds, facing our fears, and finding new ways to relate with honesty, empathy, and self-awareness. So when we talk about manipulation, we're not just talking about tactics or toxic behaviors. We're talking about a cry for help, a distorted way of trying to get needs met, rooted in pain that was never resolved. Understanding this doesn't mean we tolerate harmful behavior, but it does mean we can approach it with insight instead of just anger or confusion. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into these unconscious motivations. We'll explore the emotional wounds and hidden fears that drive manipulation and look at how these patterns are passed down, often unknowingly, from one generation to the next. Because only by understanding the full picture, the pain, the fear, the patterns, can we truly begin to break free from the cycle and help others do the same. Carl Jung once spoke about how the shadow contains the parts of ourselves that we've rejected, denied, or hidden away. These are traits, emotions, or impulses that we've deemed unacceptable, either because society has condemned them or because we ourselves are afraid to face them. But the shadow doesn't simply disappear. When we ignore it, when we fail to acknowledge and integrate it into our conscious awareness, it doesn't stay silent. It finds ways to emerge, often through destructive behavior. In the case of the manipulator, what we're witnessing is not just toxic conduct, but a reflection of unintegrated darkness within. The manipulator becomes someone who projects these rejected parts outward, seeking to control and dominate others rather than confront their own pain and vulnerability. This unconscious process forms a cycle, a pattern that repeats itself again and again. And it will continue unless it is interrupted by awareness, by healing, and by a genuine desire for transformation. It's crucial to understand this when we encounter manipulation in our lives. Behind the harmful actions and toxic behaviors, there is often a wounded human being, a person carrying emotional scars, unresolved trauma, and a desperate attempt to protect themselves from pain, though in the process, they cause pain to others. Recognizing this doesn't mean we excuse or justify manipulation. Manipulative behavior should never be condoned, but understanding its psychological roots allows us to respond not from hatred or revenge, but from a place of self-respect, clarity, and emotional maturity. For the one being manipulated, this insight can be deeply liberating. When we realize that someone's attempt to control or gaslight us is more about them than it is about us, something shifts. We begin to depersonalize the pain. We stop internalizing the abuse. We understand that we're not at fault, and that the manipulation is not a reflection of our worth, but rather a reflection of the other person's internal chaos and fear. This awareness becomes the first vital step in reclaiming our personal power. It's not just about understanding, it's about protecting ourselves. Because even if we empathize with the manipulator's pain, we must not allow that empathy to cost us our well-being. Clear, firm boundaries become a necessity. We have the right to say no, to walk away, and to demand respect. Our compassion should not come at the expense of our own peace. And what about the manipulator? Is change possible? Healing for them requires courage. It demands that they look directly at their own wounds without deflection, without projection. They must be willing to stop blaming others and begin to explore their inner world, the rage, the fear, the shame, the grief. True healing begins when they accept their pain, not as something to hide or run from, but as something that can teach them, something that can evolve. When they choose to face their shadow, to explore their inner darkness with honesty and vulnerability, that very energy can be transformed. What was once used to manipulate others can be redirected toward personal growth, integrity, and authenticity. This deeper understanding invites all of us, whether we've been manipulated, have acted manipulatively ourselves, or simply wish to grow emotionally, to approach manipulation with both compassion and accountability. We can see the pain behind the mask without letting that pain dictate how we are treated. We can be kind without being naive. We can acknowledge someone's suffering without sacrificing our own. In the end, emotional well-being is our responsibility, and the journey toward it often begins when we stop reacting out of fear or resentment and start responding from awareness, from strength, and from the quiet but powerful force of self-love. In this section, we're going to delve deeply into some of the most telling signs that indicate when we are dealing with a manipulative person, and more importantly, how to recognize those signs clearly and effectively. Understanding and identifying manipulation is not just useful, it's crucial. It allows us to protect our emotional integrity and helps prevent us from falling into the web of influence and control that manipulators so often weave. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung emphasized that manipulation often arises as a manifestation of the shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche that contains repressed desires, fears, and emotions. Because of this, manipulation is frequently subtle, cloaked in charm, masked behind good intentions, and not easily detectable on the surface. But once we become aware, once we train ourselves to see with emotional clarity, there are patterns, behaviors, and signals that become undeniably evident. These cues, when consistently present, point unmistakably toward manipulation. One of the most obvious and frequently encountered signs is the inconsistency between what a person says and what they actually do. Manipulators are often masters of contradiction. They may promise one thing and deliver another. They might say something to you in private, then completely shift their stance when speaking to someone else. Their words are fluid, changing to suit the situation or the audience. This inconsistency is not a result of forgetfulness or confusion. It's deliberate. It serves a calculated purpose to maintain control over the narrative, over people's perceptions, and ultimately, over you. They may say what you want to hear, but their actions betray a different agenda. When someone's story keeps changing, when promises are constantly broken or conveniently forgotten, it's time to pay attention. That flexibility isn't a virtue, it's a warning. Another key indicator of manipulation is the use of guilt as a psychological weapon. Manipulators are highly skilled in making others feel responsible for their problems, moods, or life circumstances. You may hear statements like, "If you really cared about me, you wouldn't do this," or "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." They frame situations in such a way that your natural empathy is used against you. Suddenly, you find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, trying to make up for emotions that don't even belong to you. This strategy is deeply effective because it plays on a basic human instinct, the desire to be kind, supportive, and not hurt the people we care about. But when this instinct is twisted into a tool for emotional control, it becomes toxic. The manipulator leverages your sense of morality and kindness to influence your behavior, not through honesty or directness, but through emotional blackmail. In addition to guilt, silence can be a powerful weapon in the manipulator's toolkit. When they don't get what they want, they may withdraw emotionally, go quiet, or even physically leave a situation. This withdrawal isn't about needing space or time to reflect, it's strategic. It's designed to create anxiety in you, to make you feel like you've done something wrong, and to trigger a desperate need to fix the situation. This often leads to you conceding, apologizing, or giving in to their demands just to restore peace. This kind of emotional retreat taps into one of the deepest psychological wounds many of us carry, the fear of abandonment. By threatening to withhold love, attention, or connection, manipulators activate that fear, making us more pliable, more willing to sacrifice our own needs just to avoid being left alone or emotionally rejected. Another sign that often goes unnoticed, but is just as dangerous, is the invalidation of your emotions. A manipulator will frequently downplay, dismiss, or ridicule your feelings. If you express hurt or frustration, they might accuse you of being overly sensitive, dramatic, or unreasonable. If you communicate a boundary or need, they might laugh, roll their eyes, or turn the conversation around to make you the problem. Over time, this leads to a devastating outcome. You begin to question your own emotional reality. This kind of emotional gaslighting creates internal confusion and self-doubt. You start to wonder if you're imagining things, if you're overreacting, or if your needs are truly as unreasonable as they make them seem. The more uncertain you become, the easier it is for the manipulator to steer your decisions and keep you emotionally dependent. A further pattern to watch for is an excessive need for attention, validation, and drama. Manipulators often portray themselves as victims, even in situations where they are clearly at fault. They might blow small problems out of proportion, create chaos, or exaggerate personal struggles, all in an effort to pull focus onto themselves. Why? Because as long as the spotlight is on them, no one is scrutinizing their behavior or calling them out. Jung reminds us that within each of us exists both the manipulator and the manipulated, the victim and the perpetrator, and that it is only through the integration of the shadow that we begin to free ourselves from these patterns. This means recognizing those parts of ourselves we have rejected, denied, or pushed into the dark corners of our psyche. The parts that feel unworthy, angry, envious, or afraid. The parts that sometimes seek to control others, not out of malice, but out of a subconscious belief that it is the only way to be safe, seen, or loved. But this journey, while powerful, is not easy. It demands courage, the courage to turn inward and confront the uncomfortable truths about who we are and how we behave. It demands radical honesty, the kind that forces us to drop our defenses and look at ourselves without filters. And above all, it requires a commitment to transformation. We must be willing to face the darker aspects of our psyche, not to shame them, but to understand them, embrace them, and ultimately, to heal them. The reward, however, is immeasurable. When we begin to reclaim the parts of ourselves we've lost or hidden, we also begin to reclaim our power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the quiet, steady power of authenticity. We become more whole, more centered, more at peace. Our relationships shift from games of control and dependency to spaces of mutual respect and vulnerability. Our inner dialogue softens, becoming more compassionate and aware. And with each step, we move closer to a life that is rooted not in fear, but in truth. When we are aware of our own shadows, when we recognize manipulation for what it is and protect ourselves from it, not with hostility, but with clarity, we take a profound step toward emotional and psychological freedom. This is not about becoming perfect or never falling into old patterns. It's about learning. It's about growing. It's about choosing every day to live more consciously, more honestly, more fully. So I invite you to reflect. Ask yourself, what parts of your shadow have you been avoiding? What internal wounds still echo in the ways you interact with others? How have you perhaps, knowingly or not, used manipulation as a means of coping or surviving? And more importantly, what would it look like for you to begin integrating those parts, to embrace them, to forgive them, and to transform them? Consider what concrete steps you can take today, right now, to protect your mental and emotional well-being. It could be setting a boundary, speaking your truth, journaling your feelings, seeking therapy, or simply taking a quiet moment to sit with yourself without judgment. Every small act of self-awareness, every tiny gesture of self-care is a declaration of love, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Because when you heal, you don't heal alone. Your healing sends ripples outward into your relationships, your community, your world. Thank you for joining me on this profound journey into the mind of the manipulator through the deep and illuminating perspective of Carl Jung. If you found value in this exploration, I invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message so that more people can benefit from these insights that have the power to change lives. This is only the beginning. There is still so much more to explore in the world of psychology, healing, and personal growth. So stay curious, stay open, and above all, stay true to your path. Until next time.